Models are the core of everything you do in ComfyUI. Without them, your workflow is just a set of nodes that can't do anything, at least if you're trying to do anything with AI. In this chapter, we'll go through the different types of models you'll encounter, what each one does and how they work together, and where to place them on your computer. We'll also take a quick look at the landscape of available diffusion models right now, so you know what's out there. The most commonly used model is the diffusion model. This is the engine behind image and video generation. It's the model that actually knows how to take random noise and turn it into a coherent image or video that matches your prompt. Every workflow revolves around one of these. Well, almost every workflow. Diffusion models are large files. Older ones were around 6 gigabytes maybe, but the modern ones are significantly bigger, commonly 10 to 20 gigabytes, with some reaching 40 gigabytes or more. The second type you'll use frequently is a LoRA. The name stands for Low Rank Adaptation, but what matters is what it does, not what the acronym means. A LoRA is a small, lightweight model that modifies the behavior of a diffusion model. It doesn't generate anything on its own. It works alongside a diffusion model to steer it towards something specific that the diffusion model wasn't originally trained to do. Here's a practical example. If you ask a diffusion model to generate a portrait of a specific person, say me, it won't know what I look like. I'm just not famous enough. My face wasn't part of its training data. It has no reference for what Sebastian Kamp should look like. But I can create a LoRA by training it on a set of photographs of myself. That LoRA learns the specific features of my face. When I pair it with the diffusion model in a workflow, the diffusion model can now generate images of me accurately in different poses, different lighting, different styles. You get the idea. Faces and people are just one example. LoRAs can be trained on anything, a specific art style, a product design, a character, a type of clothing, architecture. They're one of the most powerful tools for customizing what the AI can produce. Because they're small in file size, you can collect and swap between many of them easily. Now, savvy viewers out there might be saying, hey, Seb, I've heard about fine-tuning and other various types of models that are similar to LoRAs, but could potentially be better. And yes, some of them do exist, but LoRA is the most widespread and easily used today. And they're still very, very powerful. Beyond diffusion models and LoRAs, there are 3 other model types you'll encounter regularly in your workflows. Each one plays a distinct role, and while they don't need as much hands-on attention as your diffusion model, understanding what they do will help you make sense of how your workflows function and troubleshoot when something isn't working. First of those is a clip model. When you type a prompt like a golden retriever sitting on a beach at sunset, those words mean something to you and me, and even anyone that knows English. But the diffusion model doesn't read English in the way that we do. It doesn't read any normal language. It operates in a completely different space, a mathematical space of numbers and patterns, so the latent space or the latent space, depending on how you pronounce that and where you're from. So something needs to sit between your words and the diffusion model and translate one into the other. That's kind of what a clip model does. CLIP stands for Contrastive Language Image Pre-training. Its job is to take your text prompt and convert it into a numerical representation, a set of values that capture the meaning of what you wrote in a format the diffusion model can actually work with. This translated output is what becomes the conditioning that guides the generation process. The quality of this translation matters. A good CLIP model understands nuance. It knows that a dog sitting calmly is different from a dog jumping excitedly, and it encodes that difference into the signal it passes to the diffusion model. If the CLIP model is weak or just incompatible with your diffusion model. The AI might ignore parts of your prompt, misinterpret your description, or produce results that don't match with what you asked for. Now, different diffusion models are designed to work with specific clip models. This is because the diffusion model was trained expecting input in a particular format, the format that its matching clip model produces. Now, using the wrong clip model is like hiring a translator who speaks the wrong language. The words get passed along, but the meaning gets lost, and most of the time it doesn't get passed along at all because you're going to get an error. Second is the VAE. To understand what a VAE does, you need to understand that the diffusion model doesn't work directly with images you can see. It works in the latent space, an abstract compressed representation of image data that's optimized for the AI to process. If you could look at latent space data, it would appear as a small, noisy, meaningless grid of values. It's not a visible image, even though if you do try to look at it, you might see something that represents your image, but that's not really what you want. You want to encode it and decode it into our pixel space. It's data that only makes sense to the AI. The VAE, which stands for Variational Autoencoder, is the model that converts data between latent space and the visible image world, the pixel space, the RGB space. It works in both directions. So when you feed an existing image into a workflow, for example, in an image-to-image setup, the VAE takes that visible image and almost compresses it into latent space. So the diffusion model can work with it. It's translating from your world into the AI's world, almost like taking a portal into a different dimension. When the diffusion model finishes generating, its output is still in latent space. The VAE takes the latent data and reconstructs it into a full resolution, visible RGB image that you can look at and save. It's translating from the AI's world back into yours. The quality of the VAE affects the quality of your final output. A good VAE produces sharp, accurate images with correct colors. Mismatched or lower quality VAE can introduce a lot of problems. Most of the time when you get a new model, the VAE can be a new generation where finer details like text looks much better and is much more crisp. Like clip models, each diffusion model is designed to work with a specific VAE. The pairing matters. Using the wrong VAE usually will give you an error. Sometimes the workflow might still run, but if it does, the output quality will probably suffer in ways that can be hard to diagnose if you don't know where to look. The diffusion model and your text prompt handle what gets generated. Control nets, for example, handles how it gets structured. Let's say you write the prompt, a woman standing in a garden. The diffusion model will generate an image of a woman in a garden, but it decides everything about the composition on its own, the pose, the angle, the layout, where things are placed in the frame. You have very little control over those structural decisions through text alone. Now you can say she stands here with her right hand raised above her head, but it's very hard to get exact angles and specifics like that. So control nets changes that. It's a type of model that lets you provide a structural reference, an additional input that tells the AI how to arrange the image on top of your text prompt. Here's how it works in practice. Let's say you have a photograph of someone standing with their arms crossed, and you want your generated image to use that exact same pose. You would run your reference photo through a preprocessor, a node that extracts specific structural information from the image. It can be a depth map, a canny, an open pose. In this case, we were using a pose preprocessor that would analyze the photograph and produce a simplified skeleton showing the position of the head, torso, arms, legs. You get the point. That skeleton map then gets fed into a controller model, which then guides the diffusion model through the generation. The result is an image that follows the pose from your reference while still being a completely new creation based on your text prompt. Different person, different style, different setting, but the same body position. Pose is just one example. ControlNet can work with many types of structural information. And not all models use these ControlNet models separately. Some have them already baked in. For example, Gemini, Nano Banana, many of those models have the ControlNet models baked in. So you can't really control them the way you want it, but they're working there in the background. In ComfyUI, you have the option with some models to load these control models separately, which is very, very powerful. Now, depth maps, for example, capture the spatial layout, what's close to the camera and what's far away. You will see it as almost like a black and white 3D representation. So the generated image maintains the same sense of three-dimensional space. White parts are closer, dark parts are further away, and most of the time white parts are the objects in your scene. Edge maps or Canny, for example, extract the outlines and contours from a reference image. So the generated image follows the same shapes and boundaries. And this is good if you want to keep the same silhouette of something, or you have a bunch of details on the character of a person and you want to retain all of that. Line art is fairly similar to Canny and usually used to provide a hand-drawn sketch that the AI then renders into a fully detailed image. Each type of structural control uses its own specific ControlNet model. Now, ControlNet is one of the most powerful tools available in ComfyUI for getting precise, repeatable results. New models are released regularly, and the landscape evolves fast. Rather than doing a deep dive on every model available today, which would be outdated in a matter of months or sometimes weeks, here's a brief orientation so you understand what's out there and how we got here. The open source image generation space took off with Stable Diffusion 1.5 in 2023. It was one of the first models that was both publicly available and capable enough to produce genuinely impressive results. It built a massive community around it, with countless LoRAs and derivative models created by users. By today's standards, the quality is noticeably limited, particularly with things like hands, fingers, and faces at a distance, but at the time, it was groundbreaking. And compared to competitors like Midjourney with Stable Diffusion and ControlNet models, you had so much more control that for client work, it was a great improvement. SDXL, or Stable Diffusion XL, followed as a significant upgrade in quality and capability, and it became the dominant model through much of 2024. The community around it was very active in producing a huge library of fine-tuned models and LoRAs. Today, the field has moved beyond Stable Diffusion, and we have models like Qwen, FLUX, Z-Image, and a bunch of others. Each has its own strengths. Some excel at speed, some at quality, some at video generation, for example, and some support LoRa, some don't yet. Some are fully open source, others have more restrictive licensing, and some are fully closed source like Gemini and Nano Banana. This will keep evolving. New models will emerge, current ones will be improved or replaced, and the community will adapt. So you need to adapt too. The important thing isn't memorizing which model is the best right now. It's understanding how models work within ComfyUI so that when the next generation arrives, you can pick it up and start using it immediately, because the next generation is just a week or a month away. They keep coming, new and new and new models. So you have to evolve, I have to evolve, keep learning.